Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of Joann Fabrics. You've been curious about what's going on with this company. It seems like they're everywhere, but also facing some serious challenges. We're going to unravel this story using a YouTube video that you shared, which digs into the reasons behind Joann's recent struggles.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting case study because on the surface, you see this massive company, the biggest fabric retailer in the U.S., but they've also filed for bankruptcy twice.
Yeah, so what's going on there?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the video we're looking at offers some really surprising insights. For instance, it turns out that Joann's growth was actually tied to the decline of home sewing.
Oh, okay.
Right, and it's not as counterintuitive as it sounds. As fewer people sewed clothes at home, Joann really capitalized on the growing need for specialized crafting supplies. They were catering to hobbyists who wanted more than just, basic fabrics.
So they were almost like a phoenix rising from the ashes of the decline of home
Yeah,
sewing.
exactly.
But as we'll see, that strategy might have trapped them in a corner later on.
Exactly. To really understand Joann's current situation, we need to go back to the beginning. This isn't just some recent pop-up store. This is a company with over 80 years of history and over 800 stores across 49 states.
Wow. Okay, so let's go way, way back then.
Yeah.
Back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And their origins are surprisingly humble. They were founded by German immigrants in Cleveland in the 1940s. And the name, no, there's never been a Joann running the show.
Right. It's actually a combination of the founders' daughters' names, Joan and Jacqueline,
Oh, okay.
which eventually morphed into Joann Fabrics.
Yeah.
And that evolution reflects their growth from a small fabric shop in Cleveland to the national chain we know today.
So it's like that game of telephone where a message gets distorted as it's passed along. Except in this case, the distortion led to a really catchy brand name.
Exactly. But their success wasn't just about a catchy name. They also really understood the changing retail landscape. Remember, this was the era of big box stores and category killers.
Okay, back up a second. Category killer. What exactly does that mean?
Think of it like this. They became so dominant in the fabric market that they essentially squeezed out all the smaller competition, like a big fish swallowing up all the little fish. And that was a common strategy in the 80s and 90s.
So, like, Toys R Us with toys or Blockbuster with video rental.
Exactly.
Got it.
Joann really embraced that approach, acquiring competitors and solidifying their position as the go-to place for fabric. But here's where things get interesting. That very success in fabric led them to expand into a new arena, arts and crafts.
Okay. But wasn't that a logical move? I mean, fabric is a core component of many crafts.
It seemed logical, but it also put them in direct competition with some very established players, Michaels and Hobby Lobby. And the video suggests that Joann may be struggling to keep up in this new landscape.
So it's not enough to just be the fabric king anymore. They need to compete on a broader level, offering a wider range of products and services.
Exactly. And this is where some of the criticisms about Joann come into play. The video mentions complaints about store organization and customer service compared to their competitors. That can definitely impact customer loyalty.
Yeah, I can see that. If you're used to a certain level of service and organization at a Michaels, you might be less forgiving of shortcomings at a Joann Fabrics, even if you're just there for fabric.
Right. And this is where the story takes another turn. We've seen how Joann rose to power, but now let's look at why that success didn't last. And a big part of that story involves a leveraged buyout back in 2010.
Ah, yes, the buyout. This is where things get a bit more complicated. So a private equity firm, Leonard Green and Partners, swoops in and buys Joann Fabrics for a whopping $1.6 billion. On the surface, that sounds like a success story, but
you see, leveraged buyouts are like a high-stakes gamble. They often involve using the acquired company's assets as collateral for loans. Sometimes they pay off, but for Joann, it was like betting the house and losing.
because they were saddled with a massive amount of debt.
Exactly. And that debt burden made it much harder for them to invest in things like store improvements, customer service, or even inventory, all of which could have helped them compete more effectively against the Michaels and Hobby Lobbies of the world.
So it's almost like they won the fight, but then got hit with a massive medical bill for all the punches they took.
That's a great analogy. The buyout left them vulnerable just as the retail landscape was undergoing massive shifts.
And then, of course, we had the pandemic. Now, that was a strange time for a lot of retailers. Some struggled, others thrived. Where did Joann Fabrics land in all of this?
Well, initially, they actually saw a surge in sales. Remember everyone taking up baking and knitting during lockdown?
Oh, right. I remember trying my hand at sourdough and failing miserably. But a lot of people turned to crafting, and that must have been good news for Joann Fabrics, right?
Absolutely. People were stuck at home looking for ways to stay busy and creative. And Joann, with its vast selection of fabrics and craft supplies, was perfectly positioned to benefit from that trend. In fact, they even decided to go public during this period, capitalizing on the increased interest.
So they were riding high on the pandemic wave,
Yeah.
but then what happened?
Well, like all waves, it eventually crashed. As things started to open back up, people went back to their pre-pandemic routines, plus the economy took a hit and inflation started to rise. That meant people had less disposable income to spend on things like, crafting supplies.
I remember all those supply chain issues we were hearing about.
Exactly. Those definitely impacted Joann Fabrics, especially since they source a significant portion of their products from China. The cost of importing goods skyrocketed, and they weren't always able to get the supplies they needed, when they needed them.
So they were dealing with a perfect storm, declining sales, rising costs, and supply chain disruptions. That couldn't have been good for their bottom line.
You're absolutely right. And if you remember, they were already carrying a heavy debt load from that leveraged buyout.
Right.
So all of these factors combined to create a very precarious financial situation.
Which brings us to the issue of inventory. The video highlights a quote from Joann's interim CEO where he mentions constrained inventory levels as a major factor in their second bankruptcy filing.
And it's not just about having enough product on the shelves, it's also about having the right product at the right time. If you're a customer, you walk into a Joann Fabrics looking for a specific type of yarn or fabric and they don't have it, you're likely to go somewhere else.
Especially if it happens repeatedly, you lose faith in the store's ability to meet your needs.
Exactly. And here's where the debt comes back into play. Because Joann was in such a weak financial position, their suppliers started demanding upfront payments. They were basically saying, we're not sure you're going to be around to pay us later, so we need the money now.
That's a tough position to be in. It's like a vicious cycle. You need inventory to generate sales, but you need money to buy inventory. And if your finances are shaky, suppliers won't give you the credit you need.
It's a classic catch-22, and it's one of the key factors that led to Joann's second bankruptcy. They simply couldn't break free from that spiral of debt and inventory shortages.
So we've seen how Joann rose to power, capitalized on the decline of home sewing, and became the fabric giant we know today. But then we saw how that success led them to expand into a more competitive market, how a leveraged buyout saddled them with debt, and how a combination of external factors and internal missteps created a perfect storm that led to their current predicament. It's quite a roller coaster ride, isn't it?
It really is. And the video poses a very important question. Can Joann Fabrics recover from this? Or are we witnessing the slow decline of a once mighty retail giant?
That's the question we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at Joann's vision for the future and whether that aligns with the reality they're facing. We'll also consider the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for them in an ever-evolving retail landscape. So we've seen how Joann Fabrics got to where they are today, but the big question is, where do they go from here?
The video actually highlights Joann's vision statement, which is to be the inspirational leader that helps everyone find their happy place through superior assortments, presentation, and service.
That sounds lovely, almost like a mission statement for a yoga studio or something. But does that vision really match up with what's happening in their stores?
That's the disconnect they need to address, right? If you walk into a Joann Fabrics today, does it feel inspirational? Do they really have a superior assortment compared to their competitors? And what about the service?
Yeah, those are tough questions. And I think it's important to get the perspective of actual customers, Have you noticed any changes at your local Joann Fabrics? Do you still shop there? What do you like or dislike about the experience?
It's interesting how a brand like Joann Fabrics can evoke such strong memories and emotions. For many people, it's more than just a store, right? It's a place where they discovered their love of crafting, where they found the materials to create something special, or where they connected with other crafters.
It's almost like a community center for the creatively inclined.
Exactly. And that sense of community might be the key to their revival.
So instead of just trying to be everything to everyone, maybe they need to double down on their core strengths, become the ultimate destination for serious suists and fabric enthusiasts. Offer workshops and classes, create a space where people can gather and learn.
I think that's a really, really smart approach. Focus on what they do best and build a loyal following around that expertise.
And maybe that means scaling back on some of the other stuff, the less profitable categories, the things that don't really align with their core identity.
It's about making strategic choices,
Yeah.
being willing to let go of some things in order to excel at others.
It's like Marie Kondoing their entire business. Only keep the things that spark joy and
Yeah.
get rid of the rest.
Exactly. It's about decluttering their business model, just like you might declutter your home. Focus on what truly matters and let go of the excess.
And in doing so, they might just rediscover that happy place they talk about in their vision statement.
It's not going to be easy. The retail landscape is more competitive than ever,
Yeah.
but I think there's a real opportunity for Joann Fabrics to carve out a unique niche for themselves.
They need to become more than just a retailer. They need to become a destination, a community hub, a place where creativity thrives.
And that's something that online retailers can't easily replicate. It's about creating a tangible in-person experience that connects with people on a deeper level.
So maybe this isn't the end of the story for Joann Fabrics. Maybe it's just the beginning of a new chapter.
A chapter where they embrace their heritage, redefine their purpose, and build a brighter future around the things that truly matter.
It's a story of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of creativity.
And we're excited to see how it unfolds.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Joann Fabrics. We hope this has given you some food for thought, some new perspectives, and maybe even inspired you to pick up a needle and thread or a paintbrush or whatever creative tool speaks to your soul.
Keep those creative sparks flying.
Until next time, happy crafting.
As always, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment below. There are also some links in our description that you may find useful.